President Buhari expresses satisfaction over 50 years of Nigeria-China bilateral ties.
Petroleum industry bill to receive prompt attention as National Assembly resumes plenary today.
PIBB is that the petroleum industry bill. We are committed to passing it this year.
INEC begins preparation for 2023 polls, inaugurates strategic plan committee.
This plan will form the basis, as I said, for the formulation of the election project plan.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall continue our conversation on curbing frequent industrial actions in Nigeria.
The frequent industrial actions in Nigeria by various unions and associations has become a source of concern to many well-meaning Nigerians within and outside the country. Kinsley.
That's right, Jumaina. As a way of seeking a lasting solution to such disruptive actions, the NTA flagship program, Good Morning Nigeria, put together some experts on labor matters last week to discuss the issues that have over the years continued to cause industrial disharmony in the country.
And now the guests identified crisis of compensation, collective bargaining, active social dialogue, sanctity of collective agreement, failure of industrial relations practice, as well as consultation within the sector as some of the major factors responsible for frequent industrial actions in Nigeria.
Now, the labor experts also said that industrial action is more frequent in the educational and health sectors, but that the energy sector has also registered some substantial number of strikes over the years.
And they mentioned the categories of disputes bedeviling the workforce to include those of rights, interest, and recognition.
Now, the guests were of the view that it was impossible to accelerate national development without a motivated workforce, well-paid and well-trained.
They therefore advocated reform bargaining structure as well as revive National Labour Advisory Council to stem the tide of industrial actions in Nigeria.
Now, as some of the unions have now embarked on another strike action after the 9-month-long strike by ASU, what should be done to calm their nerves to call off their strike? What should also be done to revive the National Advisory Council on Labour, and which reform is needed in the bargaining structure? What should also be done, as it were, to ensure that industrial relations practice is top-notch? What steps ought to be taken to reduce crisis of compensation in the labour market? These are some of the issues we intend to also focus on today as we continue our conversation on curbing frequent industrial actions. It's Good Morning Nigeria. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I join my colleague Kingsley to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria. We are reaching you live in Abuja. Thanks for joining us. Now, stakeholders in cotton production solicit more involvement of the state governments. Let's join Kunle Adeye for details.
Cotton production, being a subsector of the agricultural sector, is now witnessing a rebirth based on the commitment by the federal government to diversify the economy, with agriculture expected to play a pivotal role. State governments are, however, enjoined to complement the efforts of the federal government.
With the intervention of the Central Bank of Nigeria in the Anchor Borrowers Program for the CTG, where again it's not just input financing for farmers, but they are also supporting the ginneries, the textile companies, and they even tied up the uniform services to source their fabrics from this Nigerian cotton, and of course from the textile companies. I think that will build and the sector make it stronger and bring it back to life.
In another development, a professor of capital market, Uche Uwaleke, has attributed the excellent performance of Nigeria's equities market in recent months to favorable policies of government.
The central bank deliberately fostered a low interest rate environment, of course, against the backdrop of the economic recession. So because interest rates crashed, as it were, yields in the fixed income, of course, fell. So investors shifted preference from fixed income, from the money market, to equities. So that's why we saw the boost in the equities market.
With business news, I'm Kunle Adeyeye.
Thank you, Kunle, for the business package. Coming up next now is Newspaper Review.
Today we have the Daily Trust newspaper to begin with. Just below the masthead, we have 13 UK coronavirus variants now in Nigeria. That's coming from the federal government. You find details on page 8. Federal government replacing BVN orders with NIN, attributed to Fantami. BUA buys 1 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines for Nigeria. You find all the details on page 4. Banditry, kidnapping, Northwest governors working at cross purposes. That's coming from El Rufai, governor of Kaduna State, with riders, says criminal headsmen must die. I will not backtrack on dialogue, Matawali. Government must negotiate from position of strength. That's coming from experts, and we want peace, says McBahn. And the picture story there, firefighters trying to put out fire at a section of Ahmadu Bello Stadium in Kaduna yesterday. Stop running to Buhari over insecurity, Senate tells governors. Details on page 4. At the bottom plate of the Daily Trust newspaper, ex-Katsina local government boards arraigned over ties with bandits. You find that on page 6. Bandits commander, 6 orders surrender 29 rifles in Zamfara State. Details on page 6. 187 Aaron vessels rotting away in Navy jetties. You find all that on page 38. Kesley.
Okay, let's also take a look at the front page of the Punch newspaper from above the name flag. IMF rules out Nigeria's full economic recovery before 2022. Fani Kaude leads talks with APC, and 4 PDP governors plan defection. That's on page 14. On page 11, corruption thrives because offenders are not jailed. That's according to Amechi, Minister of Transport. Petrol landing cost rises to 180 naira as oil crosses $60 per barrel. That's on page 28. Lead story comes with a kicker. Buhari's COVID-19 jail threat. States list enforcement obstacles as Nigerians shun compliance. That's on page 2, and you have a number of riders to that headline. During first wave, we spent 10 million naira daily on task force enforcing rules, says Cross River, effecting mass arrest difficult. According to Enugu, Kano and FCT arrest 243 offenders. Coercive measures will be used. Force headquarters warns violators. And the photograph there on the front page goes, of course, with the headline, 10 suspects arrested and weapons seized in Benue communal conflict. Provocative sermons. JNI backs Ganduje for ban on Islamic cleric. That's page 7. Federal government planning to replace BVN with NIN, says minister. Kaduna sex party. Police witnesses disagree on suspects and incident. El Rufai and Bello oppose Gumi's peace shuttle, and IPOB attacks cleric. 5 killed in Plateau attacks, and Zamfara bandits surrendered 28 AK-47 rifles. AU allocates 42 million vaccine doses to Nigeria, and Kakove donates oxygen. That's on page 7. Do you mind?
Yes, you know, in the Daily Trust newspaper, they say 29 rifles in Kano. There's a little bit, I think, of disparity there.
Well, yes, that's the question of the numbers. But of course, the fact that the rifles have been turned in probably is also a source of some potential respite.
Yes, positive development.
Yes, a positive development. But one story that I find a bit curious here is the story attributed to the Honorable Minister of Communications and Digital Economy, saying federal government planning to replace BVN with NIN.
Others with NIN.
Yes, that's what this one says with NIN. That's a BVN with NIN, and this is according to the minister. I am just wondering, it is less than 10 years that we were all required to have the BVN, which is the bank verification number. And we have seen what has happened since December, as hordes of Nigerians have been cramming the various registration centers to get their NIN, resulting in at least 2 postponements of the effective date of the blockage of telephone numbers or telephone lines without the companion NIN. So I don't know. Yes, NIN is useful. Why do we need to change the BVN? Why do we need to change the BVN? I think that is a very curious point. Yes. Does the BVN not serve its own purpose? Must we change the BVN with a NIN? Are you getting my point? Yes. And then, assuming you are a Nigerian and you are outside the country, and you already have your BVN, how are you then going to get your NIN if you are not in the country, or you don't? I mean, the means of your going to a Nigerian mission abroad is fairly complicated. Yes, so why that? I won't be surprised at some point we will now be told that no, the NIN for your banking facilities or banking requirements will now be your international passport number. So what is the? It's a bit confusing.
It's confusing, actually.
And at what point are you going to say you are now changing your BVN to NIN? So you will now have millions of persons besieging the banks to go and change, because the banks will say you must come physically to come and change it. So what is all this? Sometimes it's so confusing.
And in this period, with this COVID-19 out there,
no, at any period in time, actually, it's unnecessary. Nigerians cannot, routinely just be asked to go and get a number, go and get a number. The BVN is less than 10 years old. Yes. Less than 10, and even before the BVN, if you recall, bank accounts used to have different digits. They said now they wanted NUBAN, that is the uniform bank account numbers. So bank accounts now became 10. So you had to go to the bank to go and fill that. After you finish filling that, they now said, no, everybody must have BVN. So you have done BVN, they now say you must come with NIN. I think some of these things need to be streamlined.
Yes, Bayo is here already. Bayo, you're welcome.
Thank you. I think the Honorable Minister for Communication and the Economy explained this. He says that he has in fact informed the National Council for National Economic Council about this. And the whole concept is that while BVN is restricted to people and the account numbers, national identification number is for every citizen. Not every citizen has a bank account for which he must have a BVN, but every citizen ought to have a NIN, which will represent, and also registered residence, which will represent that you are a Nigerian and you are in the country. And therefore, he also emphasized that BVN is by regulation imposed by the central bank, but national identification number is established by law. So legally, that supersedes the BVN. The inconveniences you have pointed out, yes, it is there, but gradually we are going forward. The whole concept is we are going forward by coalescing all the various data you have into one. When you have that, when that is achieved by NIMSI, then we won't have all this problem. Because normally before, you will have to go for your driver's license, that is another registration. For passport, another registration. For national identity card, registration. Voter registration card, registration.
It's all going to be in the NIN.
Now, with the NIN now, everything is coalesced into one. Whenever you go for anything, they just ask for your national identification number, and the data is centralized.
Well, Bayo, I get the point. Look, that doesn't mean that you do not have other forms of numbers. if you were to register at a university for a course today, you will have your registration number or matriculation number, as it is called.
Yes.
If you were to apply for a passport, either for renewal or otherwise, you will have a passport, and your passport will have a number. And that passport is not your name. So I will say that if you have your international passport, it's your international passport, and it has a number for that particular purpose. Even your driver's license has a number.
Yes.
For a particular purpose. And so for banking purposes, if the central bank says that the BVN suffices, who says that the BVN has not been effective? In cases of prosecution of some persons who were found to have been light-fingered, they have traced their multiple accounts through the BVN.
Yes.
So what is all this? You know, I'm just talking about the multiplicity of instructions and regulations requiring you to go and line up and then queue and get one number, you alter it, get another one. I mean, it's just, you don't be surprised. Sometime in the future, some other minister is going to wake up and say, no, this wasn't necessary. We have to disaggregate it.
I hope not.
Oh, well.
You know, it's quite confusing.
The other matter of concern is that the Senate is hoping to resume for plenary today. But the Senate leader, Alhaji Yahya Abdullahi, has expressed serious concern about the recent crisis going on between herders-farmers clashes, kidnapping and banditry. And specifically, he says his deputy National Senate leader is expected to raise a motion on this. And he has also put in the perspective. He's saying that political leaders at the national level, at the state level, local government, and even including councillors must all put their heads together to articulate and address the challenges, because we cannot continue to have this crisis, because communities that hitherto have lived together peacefully are now pitted against one another. And unless we do something about it, it is going to have existential issues that it will raise. And across in Kaduna State, Governor Nasiru El-Rufai has differed from his brother governors. He says that he does not believe in the idea of dialogue with bandits. And his arguments are simple. A man who has been doing kidnapping and getting 1 million, 2 million, you want him, you believe that he can go back to selling his cow and getting 100,000 and 200,000. He said that is not possible. And therefore, the best approach, according to him, is that we will seek the cooperation of the federal government with the support of the Air Force, the Army, and the police, take the war to them. The only way out is to extinguish them. Either they abandon what they are doing or they face the wrath of the law. That, he says, is the alternative. But he has emphatically said that the idea of negotiating with them, as has been proposed, and even the recent visit by Dr. Ahmad Gumi, visiting and trying to negotiate, he says he doesn't believe in that. And he has specifically told his friend, Sheikh Ahmad Gumi, that that will not work. The only way out is to use force to disperse these criminals.
Matawali say he will not backtrack on the dialogue anymore.
Well, it's a matter of options. Again, every state has their option and their initiative. As far as Matawali is concerned, that has given him a lot of mileage. There was a lot of trouble with banditry in Zamfara. And when he used that dialogue, it worked for him. Governor Masari tried it in Katsina. It didn't work. So to the extent that he had to pull out of it. So every situation with his own peculiarities.
Well, I think one statement to make about kidnappers that we are seeing now, these are pagans, clearly.
I saw the picture with Gumi and some of the bandits.
Yes.
Fully decked up in military attire.
Military fatigue. And
yeah, fatigue with the gun. He put, you know.
Yes.
So, and then you are asking yourself, whatever happened to the Firearms Act?
Yes.
The level of lawlessness, should we give encouragement to persons, to arm themselves, and then rise up against the authorities, and after a while you call for negotiations? These are rebels without a cause, assuming they are rebels in the first instance. As I said, kidnappers have now become clearly pagans. One of the latest kidnapping incidents, a corpse was being conveyed from Lagos to Enugu,
yes,
for burial.
I was going to refer to that.
For burial. And the kidnappers attacked the ambulance in which the body was being conveyed. The ambulance then ran into a ditch. On the front seat with the driver was the brother of the deceased. The kidnappers seized that brother and then said they were going to, they then took him into the forest and then started asking for ransom.
They are demanding 5 million.
5 million. And the body, you saw a dead body? I don't know. It's, Actually, sometimes, no, these drastic measures are required.
The way I saw that guy sitting down, arrogantly,
Even
as if he was in control.
Even Sheikh
He's in
Gumi said
control.
that most of them are illiterate, they are uneducated. Governor Nasir El-Rufai said that many of them are not even Muslim. They can't even recite ordinary Fatiha. So it is not religious, it is just criminality.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Okay, Bayo, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you too.
I hope the traffic didn't stop you.
Yes, traffic is another thing.
Traffic is another thing in Abuja now. Thank you so much for coming. We'll take a break now. When we return, our conversation will begin. Yeah, welcome back. You remember last week we began our conversation on curbing frequent industrial action in Nigeria. Now let's take an excerpt from the first edition by Oyeyemi Ajayi. We'll be right back.
Three categories of dispute: dispute of rights, dispute of interest, and then dispute of recognition. For the very first time in 2005, our law came to recognize one aspect of these three categories of disputes, and that is disputes of interest. And the law now says there shall be no right to strike in all other areas, except when the issue in contention is dispute of interest, during which time the union can, at a meeting of every member of the union, elect to go on strike or not to go on strike. Tacitly, that has given a leeway, and government that is not willing to pay any of these rights, statutory employment rights and non-statutory employment rights, to dilly-dally before the budget is passed for the next session, will use delay tactics.
I think that we will notice that the frequency of strikes have usually been greater in two major sectors, the educational sector and the health sector. And I know there are strikes in other sectors, petroleum and all that. But these two sectors have become systematic in terms of the frequency of occurrence of industrial actions. And I think that it is for us to try to understand why. And I believe that there are two major reasons accounting for the frequency of industrial actions, particularly in these two sectors. Number one is the failure of industrial relations practice, largely on the part of government. I think that in the first place, we need professionalized industrial relations, particularly in the government sector, to deal with these issues. The second major reason, particularly for these two sectors, is the contestation within the sectors themselves.
We have Vision 2020 before. We used to say that by 2020, Nigeria will be one of the leading 20 economies. That has passed us now. I think we have launched another Vision 2050, which is now being consummated. You can't drive this vision for development without motivated workforce, well paid, well trained.
The engine room.
The engine room. It is the workforce, that will be able to do so. And that means that salaries should be paid regularly. You must also periodically review them in the light of inflation. I've always been arguing, even our annual budget, look at the budget assumption. They will tell you the price of oil, of crude oil. What will be the benchmark? $80, $100. They tell you what will be the rate of inflation. The exchange rate will be well defined. Now, I also want to know how many jobs will be created. What will be the minimum pay for the workforce? No, those assumptions should be clear. How much will be paid to motivate the workforce.
All right, now those were excerpts from the first part of our conversation on how to tackle the frequency of industrial actions in Nigeria. Today, of course, we are returning to the subject matter, and we have with us in the studios now the Honorable Minister of Labour and Employment, Dr. Chris Ngige. Honorable Minister, a pleasure to have you with us this morning.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
And just for us to indicate, because if you listened to the first part of our conversation, and more particularly the excerpts a while ago. There are a number of issues that the Honorable Minister would respond to. He couldn't be with us when we started the conversation last week. So we'll take the Minister for a while and then bring in the other guests who are joining us also from Abuja studios as well as from Lagos. So let's begin with Dr. Chris Ngige. The fundamental assumption, which is the reality, we believe, that the Nigerian economy has been bleeding in recent years from frequent industrial actions. Why is this so?
Well, first and foremost, you use the right word. You said the economy is bleeding, hemorrhaging. Yes. And this is also an economy that has had a downturn. Especially with this administration, for no fault of ours, oil price came plunging from $130, $120 a barrel to first 70, 50, and at a point in time, $30 a barrel. Oil production. OPEC has a quota for their countries. Nigeria has a quota of 2.5 with condensate, 2.2, then condensate about 300. And this production is per day, barrels, millions per day. What did we see from 2015 down? First militancy in Niger Delta, people felt, oh, our owner is no longer president. Pipelines were damaged, vandalized, and oil companies were harassed, kidnapped, and that's their staff members. And then production fell from these 2.2 million barrels, 2.5 million barrels, to 1 million barrels. And at a point, even 500,000 barrels a day. So what you notice is that the economy, the Nigerian economy that is monodependent on oil, suffered an earthquake, not even a shock, an earthquake, because the earnings, the dollar earnings, for which our economy is tied to, was not even halved. The earning was about 25% of what it was before. So when you have an earthquake, not a shock, you see buildings cracks, buildings fall, and the rest of them all. And this is what happened. But a lot of the workers did not seem to comprehend, did not seem to want to adjust to this situation. The good thing that the government that came in is a government that was able to arrest the hemorrhage that we're having. The hemorrhage were leakages of all sorts, from inflation of contracts to non-performance of contracts, and monies are taken, direct dipping of hand into the national treasury and taking money through misappropriation and the rest of them all. The government of Muhammadu Buhari came, put in the TSA. That is the first major thing. All accounts, we want to see them in one place. Put in audit, PICA, personnel audit, presidential audit of who is who in the service, public service. And from there, again, they put in IPs, Integrated Payments Platform. You see everything. Again, who is receiving what. Money goes direct into the account, not GIF-MIS platform. You carry every money and put in the university or teacher hospital and everybody scatters the thing. It must finish. No. And government was able to save billions, hundreds of billions. That is why me and you are still saying we have a country called Nigeria. Otherwise, look at Venezuela. Look at Venezuela. Look at the others that are around us. So what then happened was, again, unfortunately, you had the rise in inflation worldwide. So you needed to readjust. So these disputes, the incessant disputes we've seen, are majorly economic. Not that the employers are not doing well, especially those in the public sector where we are, the government. No. So this is for me, the cardinal foundation of all these industrial disputes, economic. The earnings of government fell. The economy went down into the doldrums. The workers' pay eroded by inflation. So they wanted to agitate for more. And in agitating for more, let me tell you from my experience as labor minister, they will not come out to tell you that it is economic or that it is money. They will bring money, but they will shroud it with so many other complaints. No visitation panel, no shaking of our hands every morning. Workers are treated like slaves. So many other things. So many of them are not really justifiable. But what do? In industrial relations, you must talk. Social dialoguing. You must dialogue on every issue. That is the ILO principles between employer and employee. You must talk with your employer. You must also talk with your employee. You must do it. Social dialoguing. You must. Negotiation. It must be done. And when you finish, if it is particularly in terms of earnings and other things, you do what is called collective bargaining agreement, CBA. You do it. But again, the workers also fail to realize that CBAs are renegotiable. You renegotiate them. Because you need the enterprise to be alive. If you don't have an employer, you won't have an employee. So that enterprise must be alive. Whether it's GOE, government-owned enterprise, or POE, private-owned enterprise. It must be alive. That is why they told you, you go and renegotiate. At any given time, that you have pains with what the status quo is. So, but again in Nigeria, for them to renegotiate it, the instrument of strike is placed first. When strikes are last option in any negotiation or any disputes. Why is that so, that they place strike in front? Because you wake up, you see your workers are no longer there. Sometimes without negotiation, no notice. But the labor status, the labor laws, both ILO and even the local of various countries, make place for warning or what we call trade dispute notes. You give time. They are there. Essential services, 21 days before you go. But you wake up Sunday, somebody tells you, we are doing warning strike. There's nothing like warning strike. That is how it tells you, I want to negotiate with you. Warning strike. 7 days. I have a group that gave 14 days warning strike. So it's ridiculous. While the strike is the last weapon and last option of choice. In ILO principles at work, even in Section 43 of the Nigerian Trade Dispute Act, strike is allowed if you exhaust the processes. But the employer also is giving some relief. In principles at work, he says, an employer, to maintain his enterprise, for the enterprise to be alive, especially in essential services, is permitted to employ people while you were away to fill the gap. Again, if you are away on strike, he exercises discretion on how to keep his enterprise alive. There is an instrument called no work, no pay in Nigeria. Abroad is called no compensation. Because you use the money for those workers who are going on strike to pay those adult persons you have brought in. And again, if you are away, the unions, the trade unions, where you belong to, will pay you for the period of the strike. That's why they collect check-off dues. They pay you. But here, people go on strike, sit at home, or even parade the streets. They come back, they say, you must pay us. It becomes another issue. Just because a government enterprise, government doesn't want to be seen to be cruel. If we apply it, what the laws say, what the principles at work say, no worker that is at home will get money. And sometimes they demand it as of right. Oh, you are owing us arrears of 6 months, 9 months, like ASU is doing. I laugh at them. And that is why, as a law-abiding labor minister, I go back to my principal because there's a law that they have breached. I go back and say, give them pardon on compassionate grounds. Yes, President gives pardon to those who are in jail and they come out. He can even abate a judicial process. The Attorney General will file a nolle, prosecute, and the case stops. Or he directs the Attorney General to do so. So this is it.
He's not supposed to direct the Attorney General under the constitutional provision.
So, but that is what we have done and got them relief for those months that were at home. In fact, they are at home properly. That's the right thing to do when you're on strike. But even today, you get people who are on strike, they come to the workplace and stop others from going to work, those who want to work. It's wrong. It's obstruction. Right to free movement is guaranteed to everybody. They obstruct their own people, obstruct others. Whereas the law says in picketing, you just stand outside, if it's picketing, and be clapping and singing, and the rest of them. But there, in fact, I read where they said in LASU that they blocked the university gate and refused people entry. NASU and SANU that said they are on strike. It's wrong. It's obstruction. If the employers get law enforcement agents, they will charge them. They'll charge them to court.
Okay, Honorable Minister, if I might come in, you painted a picture like the economy is down, we had an earthquake and all that. The question I want to ask you is, every Minister of Labor that comes on board already has a pile of issues waiting for him. You know, you just hit the ground running. Yeah. You know, you start negotiations the moment you take office.
That's right.
The question is, when the country is in boom, how does the civil servant enjoy it? Is that the reason for this development we're having? When the country is in boom, does it remember the civil servants who are the engine room of government?
When the country is in boom?
Yes, when we're in boom, the oil is 150, 130. Has the civil servant ever been considered?
You're a public servant. You should be answering that question.
Yes.
This public servants enjoy. I was a civil servant.
I am a civil servant.
I started from level 9, step 5, entry point for medical officer 2, and got to level 16 before I left the service. I was in the clinics, working in Lagos, and at level 14, after my course in Pakistan, I was drafted into administration. So I was part of the public service or civil service, as you rightly know. We enjoyed when there was boom. Our salaries were regular.
Apart from salaries, like, you know, motivation, incentives,
oh yes,
and all that
we were going on in-service courses, overseas and local. We were trained, we were equipped. We were made better human beings than when we came into the service. And like I said, I went to diploma to do my diploma in hospital administration in Pakistan. Whilst there, I was being paid. And I was being given extra code, or top up, as they call it, because the Pakistani government gave us some relief. And I came back, I went another one in ASCON, Badagry. senior management courses. And that was why I was equipped as a medical doctor. I can discuss accounting, I can discuss budgeting, I can discuss admin, I can discuss personnel management. So I'm a better human being. I'm more equipped.
Issues.
Sorry?
Yeah, addressing law issues too.
I did little legal things. They told me that the Constitution is the grand norm. So as a public servant or civil servant, I started even reading the Constitution before I enter politics. Because my rights are there. So
you were reading the Constitution. You were not reading the case laws.
No, case laws was when I started practicing politics and I started visiting the courts. Yes. I was a regular customer at the courts. So when my lawyers are reading, I'm reading also. So sometimes we direct ourselves. Yes.
And also, you say you enjoyed it while you were a civil servant,
yes,
which is good. You were also a VI boy.
Yes, that's a good one.
And we were being given car loans.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
That shows you. Housing loan. Everything, they were there. Government will show it. You see, let me tell you. It's like every other person. When a man in your vicinity changes his lifestyle, you will know. You will see new cars, you see new clothes, you see his children, and you can't hide money. And that's why it's easy to catch people who are doing unorthodox things to get money. Because the lifestyle will change. So when government had good things, the public servants also, whether you're in public or private sector, because the economy is booming. The companies were alive. They had profit. They declare profit every year. They declare dividends. Some companies even give dividends to their workers. And that's what it should be. Because that the goods that lay the golden egg, their workers, they're the productive component of that establishment. So federal government, like you were asking, it was showing. Car loans were there. Housing loans were there. 13th month was even being paid in government. And at Christmas, they buy a lot of things and distribute to their workers. Give scholarship even to the children of workers. Give loan. There was a loan board in Nigeria here.
Student loans board.
Student loan board.
I was just wondering, Honorable Minister, part of what you are saying now and what we are experiencing now relates to what one of our guests last week, that's Comrade Saremo, referred to as the crisis of compensation in the workplace, and partly what you are addressing. Just before we bring in the other guests, you've given us a panoramic view of what the causative issues are in the labor crisis in the country.
Yeah.
What has been your experience as a Minister of Labor? Because, I mean, sometimes we look at you, it's as if, you know, you've barely been able to sleep for only a couple of hours. What has it been from all the sectors, energy, education, and health? Of course, the strike actions are more frequent, as our guests identified last week, in the education and health sectors. What has it been dealing with industrial crisis after another?
Well, it's been a very good experience. A very good experience. It has gotten me more matured in terms of dealing with fellow human beings. And I can tell you also, you don't need to pity me because it's out of choice. The labor laws are clear. Some ministers sit there. Once there's this kind of situation, they don't want to exert themselves or punish themselves, as some people call it. They will refer the matter. The labor laws makes a place for me to appoint, in section 7 and 8, for me to appoint a conciliator. It could be an outside conciliator. People who are arbitrators. But they will charge you fees. Where is the fee? Where is the money to pay fees? I don't have the money in my ministry. If you go to my budget on litigations and debt arising from litigation, I get 15 million. That's what the line item says. How many conciliators will I appoint and how much will I? No conciliator will take anything less than 5 million from you on any one. I also have an industrial arbitration panel. But the Social Arbitration Panel is that you must have tried. You must have started the case before you refer to them. They're the first level. After them, there are cases permitted to refer direct to the NIC, National Industrial Court of Nigeria. That is the Industrial Court. So they are there. They're layered. Those are layers of arbitration. But you must start either by appointing a conciliator, or you assume you take it so moto yourself, which is what I'm doing most of the time. Why I need to do that is that if I send them to Industrial Arbitration Panel, you don't know what will happen to the employer or to the employee. Most times, the employee will suffer. That is the worker. Because there will be I have better introspection and knowledge of the public service rules and things like that. That's why I do this. But if you also go to the court, it can linger, the industrial court. Or they can form what is called alternative ADR, alternative dispute resolution mechanism. The ones I refer to in that place, some of them have stayed long in the industrial alternative dispute resolution component. The one of Johesu and the Ministry of Health that I referred there after a long while. In fact, before my instruments were getting there, another organization has sued the people. So they are there. More than 2.5 years, 3 years. So who suffers? The man who... But if I come onto the negotiating table, I have a penchant for being fair. Because I was a civil servant, like I told you before, I would not like to maltreat these other people. So I'm fair. Whatever they can get from government, I'll tell them. And whatever government can give them, I say, government, give them. They deserve this. So that is the driving motive.
Okay. Honorable Minister, thank you very much. This last point you just made, we will return to it because one of our guests last week, Professor Richard Idubo, who is a professor of law and former dean of law at the University of Benin, did say that we have seen a situation in recent years, labor ministers descending into the arena instead of acting, of course, through third parties before the matters come to them, or for the respective ministries to take charge before the matters come to the Minister of Labour. As you said, Honourable Minister, we have the opportunity of returning to this. We did say we were going to have other guests join us for today's conversation. Let's quickly introduce them now. From our Lagos Network Center, we have Comrade Peter Esele, who is former President, Trade Union Congress. Comrade Peter Esele, all right, we'll have you with us this morning. All right, and then also joining us via Zoom for the conversation this morning is Professor Joseph Abugu, was recently named the Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Professor of Law at the University of Lagos. Professor Abugu, SAN, delighted to have you with us this morning.
Thank you.
And here in the Abuja studios is Comrade Uche Ekwe, is Head International Relations of the Nigeria Labour Congress. Comrade Uche, we are delighted to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Jume?
Do you have a cough?
No, that's okay.
Okay. So thank you so much for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria today. You've listened to what the minister has said. You know, negotiations going on the table, you know, non-negotiations, going back and forth. But what is your take on the situation in Nigeria? Insistent strike action. Should it be the way out for this country when it comes to negotiating for better life for civil servants in Nigeria?
Certainly nobody wants strikes, because those are the things we need to clear. Many people give the impression as if the labor unions and the labor movement are strike merchants. Strike is no joke. Nobody's interested in strikes. And we on our part doesn't want strike. Everybody wants to be doing the work. Yeah, I listened to the Honorable Minister, and with knowledge of hindsight of time, and having started working with the trade unions for several years back as a young man, I know that being the Minister of Labor in the country now is not a joke. It's a difficult job now, and I'll tell you why. Almost everything gets to the table of the Minister of Labor. Why? And I'm happy the Minister of Labor casted our mind back to what was obtainable in the working system. Then you had functional establishment matters department in all the government system. I know first person I got to know as a young unionist was the head of establishment matters in my state, the old Anambra state. And these are seasoned people on industrial relations matters. As a matter of fact, we spend nights trying to think through before you meet this head of establishment matters. So usually, before even matters get to the minister or the top level, a whole lot of work and discussions have been done. Basically, establishment matters don't exist anymore. I had the privilege of being in politics and returning back to NLC. And I used to share with honorable members that part of the challenge we have had in the system that leads to a whole lot of breakdown. And I need at this point make it clear that this matters and this is on strike did not start with this administration. It did not. And I will get back to there about boom and compensation, because the boom he talked about, we still had booms. When you mentioned about $130, nothing happened to the workers. So I don't say, in the days he talked, there was boom, and because the structure, the establishment matters was working. So the minister, to my knowledge, don't have the kind of pressure the ministers have now, because the dispute mechanism resolutions we are working under. So before things get to that point, a lot of things have been resolved. It's not just about having CBAs, but also, very importantly, the respect to the CBAs give courage to those who go to negotiation, knowing that it will be respected, not that they are doing discussions. In those days, like I shared with some political actors in several informal discussions, the establishment matters and those who negotiate with government were quite, I mean, the Honorable Minister mentioned about training and retraining. Those days they were retraining the people. As a matter of fact, they had advantage over the labor movement. The labor movement was a lot weaker in ability to negotiate. We, on our part, started training our people. Government abandoned training its own people. So we now go to negotiation with people who have no capacity, in reality, to negotiate with you. So you end up, the minister now being the person that will negotiate. Because these other people either don't have the capacity or don't have the authority. Combination of two things. But even my knowledge, even those who have the authority, by the time you are looking at them talking, their knowledge of the issues are very limited. And what will come out is that either agreement are entered, they don't understand, then the government gets out and say, we are not going to obey this agreement. And then you have eroded confidence in the process of discussion. Then it will look as if the trade unions and labor movement are troublemakers. But you entered agreement, you are reneging on the agreement.
Comrade Ekwe, thank you very much. The headline for what you are saying now was given to us last week by the former secretary of the NLC, Dr. Peter Ozoeson, when he indicated that part of the challenge that we are faced with now is poor industrial relations practice and training. And you have given details of what has happened in recent years and therefore a pathway to what should happen. We'll return to you in the course of the conversation. Let's pause you. Excuse me. Let's bring in now Professor Joseph Abugu. of the University of Lagos. Professor Abugu, clearly the educational sector, the health sector, they were both identified as the arena for frequent industrial actions. ASU just got out of that industrial action. I mean, since you've been in the academia, I'm sure you have lost count of how many times your union, that's ASU, has been on strike and how many months of academic sessions you have also lost. But taking a look generally, you're an author of books on industrial relations, on industrial law, by the way. What is wrong with our industrial landscape and what do we need to do?
Thank you, Kingsley. Honorable Minister, thank you for coming as well. My colleagues who are in the panel of the discussion, I also thank you so much. First and foremost, I look at the root cause of the problem. I think the government is playing the ostrich, protecting their heads and running away from the root cause of the problem. The problem per se is that of funding. The two most topical sectors are the educational sector and the medical sector. As far as the public service is concerned, this is the area where industrial actions. So let's look at them one after the other. All the strikes so far that ASU has embarked upon, that the non-academic staff unions have embarked upon, are centered around two principal things. One, poor infrastructural development. Two, shifting government policies. All of this culminating and around the issue of poor funding. The truth of it is that today, the federal government is finding it impossible to fund tertiary education in this country. Year in, year out, budgets are released, but you'll be surprised that less than 40% of those budgets are released to universities and other tertiary institutions. The institutions today are living on their past glories. The federal government no longer funds infrastructural developments. Capital budgets are virtually nil. Universities run, fee-earning programs to be able to augment cost of operations. Now, these problems are there, yet the number of intakes annually in these universities keeps surging. And yet, members of the university system are supposed to be magicians. If the minister is saying, like reputed governments have said, that because of dwindling economic fortunes, government is incapacitated, why not address the cause of the problem? Take, for instance, the private universities. Why are we saying that industrial actions are not rife in that sector? Look at the private hospital systems. Why are strikes not incessant in that sector? Now, a union like ASU has for a very long time identified this problem. The issue of education tax that the government now uses to be able to augment some infrastructural development was part of the agitations of ASU to enable government address the issue of funding, proper funding for the university system. The needs assessment fund that is being utilized today was also part of an ASU proposal to sort out the system. But for me, let's look at it practically. The Committee of Vice Chancellors had made representations to past and previous government to say, look, what we want is university autonomy. University autonomy such that the universities can regulate their budget, pay appropriate remuneration to their staff, address their infrastructural needs. That way, we don't have to be on government payroll. Let the institutions be self-sustaining. Let them devise mechanisms to attract grants and bequests that will otherwise sustain the system, like renowned universities are doing abroad. Now, but the issue that is usually raised is, if you say you want to privatize, so to say, the tertiary educational system, The poor and their children will not have access to education. The Committee of Vice Chancellors have said, look, there is a way of addressing this. Let us ascertain what is the cost of educating one student in a tertiary institution. If it costs, 3 million naira, if we are admitting 10,000 students, let that be the government subvention that will be released to the university. Let them plan their things themselves. So the issue of running to government and say, oh, we have a collective agreement, you will need to revisit it, oh, you have not addressed the issue of end allowances and all of that, all those will become a thing of the past. Yes, there are those who are against privatization, but the bottom line is, yes, if we don't privatize, there must be a system whereby the universities can be self-sustaining. That is why you find that in the private universities, you don't have this issue. The same thing with the health sector. Again, in the health sector, it is not a secret that virtually every general hospital or specialist hospital where you can find specialized medical facilities are government-owned, and they are poorly run all over the country. The Honorable Minister served in that sector. I ask myself sometimes, when it comes to the health sector, that look, how many private diagnostic centers of international repute do you have all over this country? Has government put out a program to be able to provide quality health care in the private sector? We subsidize agriculture, we provide fertilizers, we grant soft loans to industrial concerns. What is happening to the medical sector? How many specialist private hospitals do we have in this country, aided and supported by government? Either with respect to import or of quality healthcare machines, or with soft loans to be able to encourage that sector. So visually, everybody flocks to general hospitals and government-owned specialist hospitals. All over the country, when you see a private clinic, it is a 6-bed or a 10-bed, one-story building, one bungalow. Those are the people who are, augmenting the health system. So the number of public hospitals that government is responsible for need to be reduced so that government can properly fund and manage that system. The same thing with universities, the government need, the government doesn't need to put university staff on IPs or NAPIs or whatever platform. The University Autonomy Act has been passed, but it is still a 50-50 kind of autonomy. The only autonomy so far is the power of governing councils to be able to regulate, academic and administrative affairs. But funding is still principally dependent on government. And that has to change. Until it changes, the issue of whether government is funding education properly will continue to be an issue. The minister refers to the glorious old days. The minister just didn't point out that he himself was taught by a teacher and was taught by professors and lecturers too. And today, if lecturers now become a laughing stock, in terms of incessant agitations, that means we have a problem. And that problem must be addressed from the very roots of the problem. Until we do that, the rest of it is cosmetic. That's why I say it is playing the ostrich. Let us manage the situation. Let us dialogue. Today we dialogue. Tomorrow we give notice. Tomorrow we go on strike. And it becomes endemic. There are cognate proposals to address this issue, and government should pay attention to them. That's my submission for now.
All right. Professor Joseph Abugu, thank you very much there for your submission. As you indicated, we shall give a ruling on that presently. Thank you very much, Professor Abugu. We'll come back to you in the course of the conversation. Let's go over now to Comrade Peter Esele, former president, TUC. Comrade Esele, you have the benefit of excerpts from our conversation last week and also listening to our guest this morning, the Honorable Minister of Labour, Professor Abugu, and your fellow comrade Ekwe, and the issues that they have raised. So you may wish to respond to them, but take along this point. From those of us who are observers of labor, why is it that strike is a first option, apparently, for labor unions rather than a weapon of last resort?
First, I'll say thank you for having me this morning. I don't think strike is the first option. One thing I've found out over the years from my own experience is that you find out that not keeping to the rules of engagement. Everything you do, you have rules of engagement. First thing is, now how do we curb these frequent industrial actions in the country? First is your CBAs. The various laws that are governing industrial disputes must be respected. But you find out that most times it's the government that is the culprit. Why would I say government is the culprit? Let me take you back to the minimum wage issue. Now, if workers are on strike, what are you going to say? Here they come again, they're on strike again. Now, minimum wage is a law signed by the president of the country. And as I'm talking to you now, not up to 40% of the 36 states are paying the minimum wage. And now the minimum wage was negotiated at 30,000 naira after more than a year of negotiation. Now, government, they are not paying that money. And at the time that money was negotiated, I was part of the previous one that moved 18,000 naira. And at the time we negotiated 18,000 naira, it was $150. That was the plan, $150 that equals 80,000 naira. Now, the 30,000 naira that you are paying actually now is now half, is equivalent to less than the 18,000 naira that was paid then, because one, the currency has been devalued. So when you have workers being restive, first thing is that you are not providing enough succor to augment the various challenges that the workers are facing. Then you also now have to look at the other aspect of it. If the Minister of Labour just said one thing, which of course I agreed with him, I agreed on that point, that he has matured. Actually, when he was newly appointed in the first term, and I watch him on TV, a couple of us will call and will be laughing that over time he would grow into it. And actually he has grown into it. But the fact is, even the Ministry of Labour is suffering what the average workers are suffering from. Because the Ministry of Labour is even underfunded. So if the Ministry of Labour that is supposed to drive industrial harmony cannot even send its own members for training, so what do you expect? So when you talk about law, you also have to look at the morale of the workers. What are the morale of the workers? I worked all my life in the oil and gas and a private American company. The first time I started knowing that agreement don't count was when I became Trade Union Congress president, which is more, you are dealing with government directly. But as Pengasi president, no. The minister can attest to the fact now that in his own dealing with Pengasan, we will find out that it's different ball game. Why? Because in Pengasan, for example, you have a growth. Workers, the employers and the employees have what I call the symbiotic relationship. The employers know that they need the workers to survive, and the workers know that they need the companies to survive. That way they can belong to the union. So what you have is that there's an internal mechanism for growth and for their morale. The current GMD of NNPC, let me give you an information. The current GMD of NNPC was a former national deputy president of former national vice deputy president of Pengasan. So now is GMD. The current GMHRO, NNPC, was a former PRO of Pengasan. And then you also have similar thing in other IOCs. What you have is a growth phase and the relationship between the management and the union members. Everybody aspire. So in your aspiration, you already have that collaborative spirit to know that the organization needs to survive. But what the organization must do is that you must have that trust. What is lacking here is that there's no trust between the government. I'm talking about the government as an employee. But if you have to look at even NECA, for example, it's even easier to deal with NECA than to deal with the government. And I'll give you another example now. From maybe next week, we will start paying about 180 naira per liter for petrol. Because you are not getting 60, we've hit $60, so the landing rate is going to be at about 179 or 180. So you are going to start paying that. And so what that invariably means again is that the purchasing power of the average Nigerian worker will further go down. So how is he going to survive, be buffeted with all of these economic challenges? So what you have is not only just putting money in their pocket, it's to create that environment for them to thrive, that environment for them to dream, that environment for them to live, that environment to live for work in the morning and know that they are ready to provide for their family. So when all of this is lacking, you now see workers going for, give me money. Give me money invariably means that what I have in my pocket is my own. They no longer care about the environment because they know they now have that feeling that government don't care. So government also need to go the extra mile to say, okay, what is it? It's not only putting money in the workers' pocket. It's how, what do we do about the education of their children? What do we do about their health care? I'll give you another example. In the Nordic countries, an average worker pays as high as 50% of his salary as taxes. But he's sure of good education for his children. He's sure of a very sound health care for his kids. And he knows that the infrastructure for him to move from point A to point B is there. I'm in this studio today, and I'm telling you I had to virtually leave where I live to get here as early as 10 minutes to 6 so that I can get here on time. But invariably, I have some other things that I would have done with that time if you have that infrastructure for me to move from point A to point B without having to drive down. So all of this is not only naira and kobo that workers are asking for. What workers are also asking for is give us the environment. The minister alluded to the fact that workers just make various demands. Negotiation is a skill. Workers are trained. I had to tell somebody one day, I said, I was trained how to negotiate in Wharton Business School by the union. Then you also have management in the IOCs, or in the oil and gas, where I am from, my primary constituency, whereby the management ensure that union members are trained. And then you set up a training program whereby the management and the union members will sit down, understanding is there, and they see themselves as collaborators in the growth of the establishment. But what you have in our system is that government only see you as a collaborator when it's time for them to force certain things down your throat. The minister presented a picture of loans. This picture that was presented by the minister, I don't think existed 25 years ago. If we are able to look at the democratic dispensation, we started from 1999 to date, I have not seen anywhere in the government establishment where they give loans. I know that can happen in some of the private sectors, but in the government establishment, no. And I want to also talk about morals. Now, take for example, Accountant General of the Federation has been retired, or is supposed to go on retirement. Now, the laws again governing that has also changed. Government have also shifted the goalpost. Now, what that does is that the government, I read the minister's interview saying the president has the right. Yes, he has the right. But for what purpose? What intent? If you feel that man is that good, what you do, you pull him out and you make it any of your assistants. The president had that power. Because the message you're also sending to the rank and file is that you cannot aspire to this position because one man is indispensable. So what that does is that the morale of the workers are also down. So you are not getting some restiveness going on in the civil service structure, wondering why would they now also be shifting the goalpost? So it's not only about money, there's the psychological aspect of it, there is the moral aspect of it, and then you not talk about the financial aspect of it. So when you are able to put all of this in a basket, x-ray it, you find out that even managing the union is so easy. The unions are easy to manage once the union can trust you, and once the union knows that when you say good money, it's actually good money, and not to be thinking about what you are doing. So for me, that is my own suggestion. If we want to curb incessant strike, first, we must respect the CBA, we must respect the laws of the country. There must be a symbiotic relationship between the employee and the employer. Everybody must know his role. We need each other, and that is key. The unions need the employers, and the employers need the union members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Peter Esley, former President, Trade Union Congress. We've raised a lot of pertinent questions that I know the minister is itching to respond to, but we have to go on a break now. When we return, the conversation continues. You're welcome back, and we've been discussing curbing frequent industrial actions, and we've sort of gone deep into the discussion. Honorable Minister, you've listened to them. They've talked about poor infrastructural development, a system that can sustain the universities, and internal mechanism for growth. Can you respond to that? How can we be able to revive the National Advisory Council to be able to handle this kind of issues before it comes to your table?
Well, let me take on the comments. Starting with man inside the studio with me, Comrade Honorable Uche Ekwe, was an honorable member in the House of Representatives, 1999, I think, to 2003. So he knows about politics, he knows about appropriation, he knows what goes on in government. First and foremost, he's very correct when he says that initially, in the good old times, when I was in the service, like he was saying, I joined the service in 1979, and I left 1998 to join politics, 19 years. The establishment units of MDAs, ministries, government agencies, were very, very, very robust. You had trained officers. You had trained personnel persons who must have undergone courses in industrial relations. And like he said, in those days when they come as union members, they come to receive lectures and they would just depart. But today, he rightly observed again that is the other way around. They come to their MDAs and overwhelm them with superior arguments. I have tried, since I became labor minister, I created labor desks in all those ministries that are volatile with labor issues, education, health, aviation, finance, science and technology, petroleum, agriculture. I've created labor desks there. The aim being that these labor officers will be able to catch these disputes at infant stages, working in consonance with the Human Resources Department of those ministries. I have a problem there. They are regarded as aliens, intruders in those other ministries and agencies where they are. To the extent that when there is a dispute brewing, and I ask the permanent secretary or the director, trade union services, ask your outstation to give us a brief on this. You may not get the brief. The officer is summoned. He says that these people have ostracized or barricaded her or him from knowing what's going on. It does happen. It happens in education. We have to change the officer to see whether we can get an officer to them that they will like his or her face. Still is the same situation. So the HRM, the Human Resources Departments, most government agencies now do not have benefit of good industrial relations units. And it's a problem because those disputes are supposed to be caught at the infant stage. He's also right when he says that we're underfunded, yes, like every other person, but in budgeting, rightly or wrongly, everybody thinks it's only the capital budget aspect of you see buildings, you see road, you see this, that matters. No. They don't regard training, especially in a place like my place, as important. They don't. So we are not funded because the tangibles, they can't see me. So you look at my budget, even with the programs, I will have about 3 billion on capital. Whereas training of labor officers, inspectorates, strengthening them to go into factories and make sure that the working condition is good, to make sure that in the zones, they catch these things in their states and in their zones without the things snowballing into Abuja, that they're very, very important. So to some extent, he is correct. He's correct. But as government, we develop. Before I came there, the capital budget, and including the programs of the ministry, was about 200 million. Oh yes, it's that bad. So I looked at it and I said,
"How useful is the Michael Imodu Labour Institute?"
Yes, it's part of our institute. It's a labor center supposed to be our academic arm, where we train labor officers, where we train people and do even research. It's our own university. Now they are awarding diplomas. But I can tell you again, I'm not quite satisfied. They have not moved to the level I want them to be in. I even revived them. They were comatose before I came. So labor administration training is a very big issue on the public service side. Very big issue. It will be something that needs to be addressed. Professor Abugu, from what he was saying, I think he was a member of ASU, or maybe he was an officer. He analyzed the things very correctly, and but from some of the sayings, I knew he was an active member.
He teaches labor law, both undergraduate and postgraduate.
Correct. So, ASU is not a bad organization. If I were a university teacher, I would belong to ASU. Let me even tell you one mistake they all make. They come to a university, they conscript everybody and say you are a member. That's wrong. Membership is voluntary by Section 40 of the Constitution. That's how the unions came into existence. But if I were in the university system, I would be a member of ASU. We will bring out good things, and we will also moderate our organization, especially when they go on overdrive. I have belonged to so many organizations, and I become a rebel within that organization, like I was in NMA. When NMA went to overdrive and started doing partisan politics, and some of us rebelled inside there, I took them to court and stopped them. Yes. So ASU is good. They are good thinkers. Like he said, they brought the education task, which is that fund, which we are now, again, like you rightly said, falling back on when the capital budget, capital appropriation is not achievable. So if you go to universities and polytechnic and everything, now you see them. So he is very correct. But I disagree with him on university autonomy. Well, to some extent, I also agree with him that it's 50-50. He rightly pointed out this 50-50, the autonomy. Why have they not done the autonomy of financial? Why have they not done that? The autonomy stops at appointing vice chancellors to the exclusion of minister and government. They do their caucus meeting and then appoint and bring. They undertake the lobbying and everything. They enjoy maybe some under-table things and appoint. Then their job is finished. They will say they want to do contract. Again, that's another aspect they're interested in. Why have they not baked the bread for people to eat, the cake? They run away from it. University autonomy says you manage, fund, and execute. They only want to do manage and leave funding because they don't want to buy the bullet. The bullet there is that the charges on fee in the university system, tertiary system in Nigeria, is nothing to write home about. 43,000, that is what they pay at tuition. And the Americans, the wealthiest people in the world, they have the dollar. They can even print it. They don't train people free. It's either you go on scholarship or you pay. Or loan. That's what you pay. They establish the loan. The loan board there. Yeah. I have my friends there. Their children are on loan. They pay their fees. And that's why they can say, Daddy, no, I won't do this. I want to do it this way. They are paying for themselves. They pay their fees. When they come out, first 10 years of working, they are repaying their loans. You see their head very quiet and cool. But here, nobody is paying.
So the heads are hot.
The heads are hot. They're in the street. SARS. Small provocation. They're not paying. So that's even my children, I tabulate what I'm paying for them. I say, you will pay back this money. They go to my accountant and take the money, my secretary. Yes. So when they look at it, they say, Daddy say we are owing him.
And they have to pay.
They have to pay. Maybe during my old age, they pay me back as pension. So these are the things. We come here, ASU now says, education is social function. Yes, it's social. But you don't want to now generate money in their respective universities. So professor is actually not being very too straightforward. He's also playing the ostrich. They don't want to incur the wrath of the people of Nigeria by saying pay appropriate school fees. They see Alpha Babalola, Babcock, and the others charging 1.5 million, 2 million. They think they are foolish. They're not foolish. That is the only way. That's the only way. So let us get back the loan board so that people can borrow money and pay for their school fees. Let us generate money in the various universities so that we can pay the lecturers enough, so that we can equip the laboratories, so we can do our lecture theaters to be of international standard, do our research, bring in visiting professors in fields that where we are not very well kept. You bring them up through importation of people. So these are the things I want to tell the professor. The situation we are now is a situation of eating our cake and having it in our hand. It's not possible. It's not possible. You eat a cake, it must go into your stomach. But everybody wants to eat the cake and say have it in the hand. Yes, I agree that there are poor children, there are poor people's children, and they need to be educated. They should take a loan. They should take a loan and pay. Those of them that are bright, access scholarship. These are the things. When I was in the university, we had scholarship and loan board. I was on scholarship. In fact, I did 2 scholarships, federal and East Central State. I took East Central State. I dropped federal after 1 year because East Central State was bigger money. They paid medical students bigger money. So these are the things. And it made me to be reading, knowing fully well that there's a benchmark that if I fall below, I'll lose my scholarship.
That's true.
So these are the things. We must do the things rightly. Comrade Esele was also good again in his analysis. I'm just trying to point out where I disagree with them in their assertions. Because it's government, lack of faith in government breaching agreement. Those agreements, like which Ekwe has said, Comrade Ekwe has said, some government officials go into an agreement without knowing the import. They're not well trained. A good labor officer must know about budgeting, he must know about appropriation, he must know about salaries and wages and things like that. People in the various ministries, they are in that DHRM, they must know it. You don't just become a director of human resources management by only promotion because you have a BA in history. No. You must be equipped. You must have gone on courses to equip you. on human management, personnel management, stores, and everything. You should be an all-rounder to discuss anything. But that's not what we have today. So, again, government has to do training. I agree with that. I do not also agree with Comrade Sele on the issue of CBA. Collective bargaining agreements can be renegotiated. It's in the ILO statute. It can be renegotiated. Let me be frank with you. If this government is a cruel government, we will have been renegotiating CBAs to go down, for allowances to go down. Yes. But there's also a government regulation that says you cannot pay somebody X amount today, and tomorrow you reduce it, because you do him what is called financial embarrassment. If you are giving him 20,000 a month, you cannot go and be negotiating to bring him back to 15,000. Is there in the government rules? Because when he's on 20,000, he will have cut his coat for 20,000. And when you now reduce it to 15,000, you are now asking that the coat be tight. And it can tear.
What they call, it's not becoming a waistcoat.
Correct.
What they call waistcoat, that's a monkey jacket.
So a CBA can be renegotiated. He's talking as if government means you must be negotiating upwards all the time. And again, minimum wage, at least 80% of the state governments are paying minimum wage. What is doing and causing dissension is the consequential adjustment. Because minimum wage is 30,000 for the lowest person, on the lowest rung of the ladder. Grade level 1, step 1. Any other person above him gets what is called consequential. Level 1, 5, level 2, level. So these are the issue. And we have asked unions to negotiate that with their state government. We have also called the state government and said, negotiate it, but you must carry the union along. So this is it. And he has given another example I don't like people giving, that the Accountant General of the Federation. He says president doesn't have to execute that right. No. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Any other law you have, even if it's from National Assembly or State Assembly or a government regulation, and it runs counter to the Constitution, to the tenets of the Constitution, to the wordings anywhere in the Constitution, that law is void. It's struck down. It's not applicable when it conflicts with that area of the Constitution. Section 171 is an omnibus section. It permits Mr. President to appoint political appointees. It permits the President to go into the public service of the Federation and make appointments. And he listed the offices he can do so in the public service of the Federation. Office of Permanent Secretary, for which they now take exam. Some people who are permanent secretaries today didn't take exam. They were just adjudged and evaluated, and Mr. President appointed them. Tomorrow, somebody cannot come and say, oh, we must take exam. No, taking the exam is an administrative thing that was put in there. So, Mr. President can appoint permanent secretaries. But the Constitution also restricts him on who can be permanent secretary. He can bring from public service of the state and things like that. Head of service, it also restricts him and say you must appoint him from serving permanent secretaries. He gives him right to appoint heads of extra ministerial departments and agencies,
yes,
which are Accountant General of the Federation falls under. Yeah. And this present Accountant General has been appointed since 2019 for a 4-year tenure. He did his first leg as a civil servant, just like permanent secretaries were being appointed. He was appointed Accountant General. I think it was Ministry of either Agriculture or Mines, I've forgotten. He was a director there, and they moved him to become Accountant General of the Federation. His tenure of 4 years finished in 2019 June, 24th June. And President gave him another 4 years tenure. to work with him to 2023. He has a right to do so. Not to talk about when the issues concern this issue of the gatekeeper to the treasury, the man who has the key of the treasury.
All right. You know, Honorable Minister, your explanation,
Money.
of course, is sufficiently detailed.
Yes.
I mean, we've been signaled by our producer and director that we're getting pressed for time. This very elaborate conversation that we've had this morning. Jumaye, we also have a number of tweets. We just hope so that you can listen into the views of our viewers. Yunusa Idris, the best possible way to curb constant strikes in various sectors is for government to capture their demands on annual budget and implement them.
Marvin Neo tweets, as long as everyone keeps seeing the bogus jumbo pay of political office holders, those who have spent all their lives hustling through schools and hard part of life will never take it easy with them. Imbalance and gap in remunerations across all sectors too much, hence the strike.
This is coming from Bamina's Dynamic. That's the Twitter handle. Any group that deserts their office for 30 days should forfeit their salaries and wages for the period they are away, because most of government agencies that do not go on strike do not have any special allowance for their workers.
Mark Anyako, the viable way to end the sister strikes in the country is that all agreements signed by organized labor and employers must be respected. Labor should appreciate the economic realities on ground in the country and desist from making frivolous demands. Government on its side must block all loopholes in governance like corruption, spendthrift syndrome. When two elephants fight, the grass is bound to suffer. The economy and our superstructure suffer with all these avoidable strikes.
Steve Bond, 007, the solution is for government to always comply with the agreed terms. The government, in most cases, breaches the contract.
Daily Jack Solomon, in curbing insistent industrial strike actions in Nigeria, it is necessary for the government to ensure that whatever agreement it reached with the labor union and affiliated bodies are implementable, while we enjoin the Nigerian workers to ensure that strike is always the last option to be adopted as a means of resolving issues with the government of the day.
Festus Akimboyewa sad that hundreds of thousands of workers are involved in industrial actions every year, resulting in loss of thousands of working days and low productivity each year as well. Employers should take the welfare of workers seriously, while employees should embrace compromise during negotiations.
Kingsley, I think that's about what we can take
That's
from
right.
the tweets. Yes.
Those are the tweets that we can have. I would like to appreciate all our viewers for tuning in and for those who also sent in their tweets. And our guests here in the studios, as well as those who joined us from remote locations. From our Lagos Network studio, Comrade Peter Esele, former President, Trade Union Congress of Nigeria, I would like to thank you for your insight into our topic for discussion this morning. We're also joined via Zoom by Professor Joseph Abugo, Learned Senior Advocate of Nigeria, a professor of law at the University of Lagos. Prof, I delight having you this morning. And here in the studios, Comrade Honorable Uche Ekwe, who is head International Relations Department of the NLC. We thank you for being around. And last but not the least, Dr. Chris Ngige, Honorable Minister of Labor and Employment. Honorable Minister, just one point so that our viewers don't get the wrong impression. The President Muhammadu Buhari administration ensured the system-wide implementation of IPs and TSA was a carryover from the previous administration. Once again, we thank you for being around. So that's it for us.
Carryover. They didn't implement it.
It was being implemented. Honorable Minister, thank you very much for being with us one more time. We, of course, are back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, stay safe and be well. Corona is still out there. I'm Kingsley Usadolo.
And I am Jumo Yusuf. Remember to stay safe.